At the will reading, my parents gave my sister $10 million and told me to go earn my own. Then Grandpa's lawyer stood up and read a secret he kept just for me. My mom started screaming.
Final part.
Micro-irrigation systems, adaptive crop genetics, eco-friendly pest management. Things that once lived in the margins of science fairs, now, make their way into struggling farms across the state. Last month, I stood on a stage in San Francisco accepting a national grant for innovation in climate resilience. I wore a navy blue suit and my mother's silence like armor. The crowd clapped. The spotlight didn't blind me. I looked into it and didn't flinch. And beside the stage, framed under the foundation's logo, was a photo of Walter Dawson, smiling in front of a field of sunflowers. The caption read, "For the dreamers who invest in those the world overlooks." Somewhere I think you saw it. The path wasn't always easy. There were nights I doubted everything, myself, my abilities, whether I could really build something from scratch without falling apart. There were failed experiments, grant applications rejected, moments when the weight of Grandpa's expectations felt too heavy to carry. But each time I faltered, I remembered his words, "Write the things they don't understand. One day the world will." And slowly, the center grew. First, it was just me and 2 graduate students working out of what was essentially a converted barn with state-of-the-art equipment that seemed almost comically out of place among the wooden beams. Now, we have a staff of 27 researchers, 4 departments, partnerships with 3 universities, and field sites in 12 counties across Texas. Tara and Micah, my closest friends since university, now lead departments within the center. We laugh a lot. We still mess up experiments. Still burn popcorn in the break room, microwave. But we also change lives. Not because we're smarter, but because someone believed we could. Last spring, we hosted our first youth science camp. 15 kids from rural communities, each with that same look I once had, hungry for knowledge, desperate to be seen. One girl, barely 13, with thick glasses and a quiet voice, showed me her notebook filled with observations about native bee populations in her hometown. Her calculations were rough but intuitive, her questions brilliant in their simplicity. When I told her this, she looked at me with such surprise that I had to turn away to hide my tears. "You actually read it," she said, as if that was the most extraordinary thing I could have done. I knew then that Grandpa's legacy wasn't just about the research or the facility, it was about breaking cycles, about seeing potential where others saw inconvenience. We've expanded the youth program to reach over 150 students annually now. We call it the Little Scientists Initiative, a name that never fails to make me smile. Each participant receives a leather-bound notebook, similar to the one Grandpa gave me behind that barn so many years ago. On the first page, we've printed his words, "Write the things they don't understand. One day the world will." Some of our first participants are now entering college with full scholarships to study environmental science and sustainable agriculture. The center itself has grown beyond anything I could have imagined. What started as a modest research facility has expanded to include 5 modern laboratory buildings, 3 greenhouse complexes, and over 60 acres of experimental growing fields. We've partnered with international research organizations from Brazil to Kenya, sharing our innovations with farmers facing the harshest effects of climate change. Last year, our drought-resistant corn variant helped feed an estimated 40,000 people in regions where traditional crops had failed for 3 consecutive seasons. The irony isn't lost on me that the very qualities my family tried to suppress, my methodical thinking, my obsession with details, my preference for quiet observation over performative confidence, are precisely what made this work possible. There's a certain poetic justice in that, I suppose. 3 years after the will reading, I received a letter from a lawyer representing Vanessa. She was requesting permission to visit the center. At first, I thought it was another attempt to challenge the will, but when she arrived, I barely recognized her. Gone was the polished appearance, the practiced smile, the rehearsed charm. She seemed smaller somehow, more authentic in her uncertainty. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, standing awkwardly in the main lobby, staring at Grandpa's portrait above the reception desk. "I just wanted to see what he built for you. What you've built with it." I gave her the tour, showed her the labs, the greenhouses, the fields where we were testing new irrigation systems. She asked intelligent questions, took genuine interest. When we reached the community garden where local families grow their own food using our methods, she paused. "He always knew who you were," she said quietly. "Even when I didn't. Even when I pretended not to. We don't speak often, Vanessa and I. The damage runs too deep for casual reconciliation. But twice a year, she volunteers at our youth science camp. She teaches the kids about presentation skills, how to communicate complex ideas to non-scientific audiences. It's a small bridge, but it's something neither of us thought possible. My parents have made no such overtures. Last I heard, they had moved to Florida after Dad's early retirement from the investment firm. Sometimes I see Mom's name attached to charity galas in social media posts or local newspaper coverage. Dad occasionally appears in business journals, offering commentary on market trends. They exist in a world parallel to mine, neither of us crossing the boundary. Grandma lived at the ranch until last year, when her arthritis made the stairs too difficult. Now she has an apartment connected to my house in town, close enough that I can check on her daily but separate enough that she maintains her independence. We have coffee together most mornings. She tells me stories about Grandpa I never knew, how they met at a county fair when she knocked over his prize-winning tomato display, how he proposed with a ring tied to a sapling he planted in her parents' yard, how he spent 30 years tending that tree until it bore fruit. Sometimes I wonder if Vanessa ever thinks about that day. Whether Mom still hosts dinner parties and says, "I have 2 daughters," with a practiced smile. I wonder if Dad still calls himself a man of principle. But most days I don't wonder at all. What occupies my thoughts instead are the projects that line our research calendar for the coming years. The drought-resistant wheat variant that's showing promising results in our test fields. The solar-powered irrigation system we've been perfecting for small-scale farmers. The soil remediation technique that could transform depleted farmland within a single growing season. We've just secured a $25 million grant from the National Science Foundation to expand our research into climate-adaptive agriculture. It's the largest grant in our center's history, and I found myself wishing I could call Grandpa, hear his voice crack with pride when I told him. Instead, I walked the path behind the old ranch house, sat on the wooden bench he built decades ago, and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and gold. Sometimes I still talk to him there, update him on our progress, share the small victories and frustrating setbacks. Last night, Grandma joined me on that bench. At 87, she moves more slowly now, but her mind remains sharp as ever. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, then she reached into her cardigan pocket and handed me a small velvet pouch. "I should have given this to you years ago," she said, "but somehow it never felt like the right time." Inside was Grandpa's pocket watch, the one he carried every day of his adult life. The silver case was worn smooth from decades of handling, the initials WD engraved on the back nearly faded away. When I opened it, I found something unexpected, a tiny photograph carefully cut to fit inside the lid. It was a picture of me at my first science fair, beaming next to my display on honeybee communication. "He carried you with him," Grandma said simply. "Every day." I've placed the watch on my desk at the center, where the morning sun catches it just right, sending little circles of light dancing across my research notes. It reminds me that legacy isn't measured in dollars or accolades, but in the quiet certainty that someone believed in you enough to invest in your potential. Our latest research project focuses on something Grandpa always talked about, finding ways to help small family farms survive in an increasingly corporatized agricultural landscape. We've developed a cooperative model that allows independent farmers to share resources, knowledge, and market access without sacrificing their autonomy. The pilot program launched in 3 counties last year, and already we're seeing families who are on the verge of selling their land finding new paths to sustainability. When I walk through those farms now, watching children help their parents implement our irrigation systems or test soil samples using our simplified field kits, I see the future unfolding in real time. I see families staying together, communities remaining intact, knowledge passing from one generation to the next, not despite change, but because of it. Yesterday, I was rearranging one of the old bookcases in the lab's library, something I hadn't touched in years. Tucked inside a battered copy of The Nature of Things, I found a photograph. I knew the moment I saw the faded edges. It was me, maybe 8 years old, crouched in the grass behind the barn, holding a magnifying glass up to a beetle on a leaf. Grandpa stood beside me, pointing to something in the distance. We were both smiling. On the back of the photo in his careful, deliberate handwriting, he had written, "My little scientist will change the world someday." I sat there for a long time, holding it like something sacred, because now I know he was right.